All right. Hi, everybody. I don't know who exactly is actually in here, but for those of you who didn't watch my last video, I am Catherine Howard, and I'm a live streamer for AP Lang. And it's seriously one of my favorite classes I've ever taken, so you guys are doing a good job by taking it. So today we're talking about how to find rhetorical strategies, which is a really key concept in AP Lang, especially since most teachers tend to start out with rhetorical essays in their first unit. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay, share. There. Okay. Click here. Okay. So, how to find rhetorical strategies. And then also, if you guys aren't following Fiveable on their social media platforms, it's a really good idea just because if you're like me, you're taking a lot of AP classes and you have other stuff going on. So these are just nice to remind you like when things are going on and how you can prepare. So, and then next week I'll be going over student essays and like evaluating them, and we're gonna be like guessing what scores they got and stuff. So that should be really insightful. And then Kevin is going to go over a lesson about sophistication, so that will be good. Okay, so the rhetorical analysis essay is an essay where you identify strategies that the author uses in order to aid the effectiveness of the passage, as well as how those strategies are used and the author's purpose in using them. So it's not like you just say, like, they use this, this, and this. You want to say they use this, which helped aid in the theme that blank, or helped the topic of blank. So that kind of idea. So you'll be given a passage with some reading text and a prompt. And for a lot of people, this is their hardest essay. I know this was my hardest essay. And if you guys want to comment what your hardest essay is, I don't really know what the general population is. I just know my AP Lang class from last year. This was one of the harder ones. So anyway, so you'll get a prompt that looks something like this. And we're going to go over this prompt later in the lesson and actually break it down and identify strategies. But you'll just get a short prompt like this, and the beginning will say, support your analysis of her rhetoric with specific references to the text. It says it right here. So you're good. Oh, right here. Sorry. So it's asking you. It's not asking you to take a side. It's not asking you to like argue. It's asking you to just give rhetorical strategies. So in this lesson, we're just going to go over how you find those rhetorical strategies, and then later how you can like show that they support the theme or whatever. Okay, and then here's just some other tips and tricks for rhetorical essays. Mark it up as you read, because when you read, you might see, oh, there's a metaphor as you're reading, and then by the time you get to the end of the passage, you're going to forget, and then you have to go through and read it again, which would be fine if you had all the time in the world, but when you're under a time crunch, you want to just read it once and be done. So, and then when in doubt, use tone. So there's some passages that I read during the test where I'm like, I cannot find 3 rhetorical strategies. Like I just don't know. Like my brain kind of freezes up. So, but every single passage will always have a tone, whether the tone is informational or angry or happy. The tone that the author uses, that is a rhetorical strategy that you can use every single time. That will always work. And so that's just a good fallback option. And then look at soapstone. So for your introduction, since you're not arguing anything, you don't really have like, these are my 3 main points. So what you're going to do is you're going to introduce the speaker, the occasion, the audience, the purpose, the subject, the tone, and the style. And you don't have to do all of those, and we'll go over that later in this lesson. But that's just a good acronym to remember. Okay, so before we go into actual specific rhetorical terms, just realize that this is just a jumping off point. Like if you're analyzing a prompt and you see a strategy, but you don't remember what the name is, like it's not like you can't use that strategy. You can just describe what's going on and then say like why they use that. So like if you see an antithesis and you know it's but you don't remember the word antithesis, you can kind of explain what antithesis is, and they'll still give you points for that. It's not like a vocab quiz. So, but I'm just going to explain some rhetorical analysis terms just to help you guys get a better understanding of what they are, and so you can recognize them in different essays. So first is an allegory, which is the device of using character and story elements symbolically to represent an abstraction, like how society works or should work. So it's like an extended metaphor. And so a good example of this is, I don't know how many of you guys have read Animal Farm by George Orwell, but after reading that, you should probably know that it's not just about a farm. It's really, if you take the historical context of the time, it's really about like communism and all this stuff. So it's like an extended metaphor, which would be an allegory. And if any of you guys haven't read that, that's a good book to read for AP Lang. And if you guys need any more book suggestions too, because book quotes and citations or whatever are really good in AP Lang essays. If you need any suggestions, go ahead and ask. But and then analogy, which is one a lot of people are already familiar with. It is a similarity or comparison between two different things. And so they crowded very close to him with their hands always on him in a careful caressing grip, as though all the while feeling him to make sure he was still there. It was like a man handing a fish, which is still alive and might jump back into the water. And I didn't even plan this, but ironically, these are both by George Orwell, so that's pretty cool. He's a cool guy. Anyway, I'm frozen. I don't know if you guys can hear me still, but I'm just gonna wait till he done freezes. Okay, there we go. So it's comparing like them grabbing him to men grabbing fish. And so it's comparing two things that are not the same, but they have a relationship, and that's what an analogy is. So the next is an anecdote. Whoa, we do not want that. The next one is an anecdote, which is a short narrative detailing particulars of an interesting event. And then I didn't list an example for this one because anecdotes are usually pretty long. But for example, like if someone was giving a speech and they told a story of how let's say they were giving a speech about perseverance, and they told a story about like they tried out for the tennis team every year and didn't make it, and the third year all their hard work probably or finally paid off, and they just told this little story about that. That would be an anecdote, and it's typically pretty short. It's not like you're telling your whole life story. You're not telling like I went to practice describing every tennis practice and every move. It's just like a short narrative, just like it says right in the definition. So that's what an anecdote is. Or like if you're talking about you're giving like a safety lecture and you give a short anecdote about a family that gets hurt in the woods and they didn't bring, I don't know, bear spray or something. I was just pulling that out of random air. But okay. And then anaphora. One of the devices of repetition in which the expression is repeated at the beginning. Why is this there? I hate that. Okay. And the expression is repeated at the beginning of the two or more lines. So example of this would be, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And although it's not like saying the same thing, it's starting out the same, which can also kind of be an antithesis, which we'll get into later. But okay, the next one is alliteration. And so the repetition of sounds, especially the first consonants of the letters. So this one, everybody knows the classic Sally sells seashells down by the seashore. That's really hard. Okay. So that one, you won't see that as much unless it's like a poem or something, but that's definitely one to look out for. Like if you see that, it definitely means something. So that's a good rhetorical strategy you can use. And then allusion is a reference to something that is commonly known. So in the example, it says, plan ahead, it wasn't raining when Noah built his ark. If you didn't have any reference to the Bible, you would have no idea, and you had no idea who Noah is and what happened, that wouldn't make any sense to you. But since most people know that there's a Bible story about how the world flooded and Noah had to build an ark so he could survive, it makes sense. So you can allude to a lot of things like other stories. And so like this one is also an allusion where it says you're a Grinch. If you didn't know what a Grinch was, you never heard of a Grinch before, you wouldn't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing. I mean, just the word kind of sounds bad, but you wouldn't know. So that's what an allusion is. And those are all oftentimes kind of hard to notice, kind of subtle, but they're if you do close reading, and that's another thing about rhetorical analysis essays, is I strongly recommend not skimming. It honestly costs you time in the end because you have to go back and read it. Read it very close the first time and notice everything you can, and then you'll have to go back and read it. And then also, this is super awkward to interject this here, but I don't know if I'm just talking to myself, which would be totally fine because people can watch replays, but if anybody's actually here, if they would just say something so I know they're here, so I know if I need to interact with people and like stuff like that. But if I'm doing myself, I guess that's fine too. But anyway, okay, so next. Now this is not an apostrophe like the little thing you put that's kind of like a comma. This is apostrophe, which is a figure of speech that directly addresses an absent or imaginary person or personified abstraction. So it's like talking to someone who's not really there, but treating them as if they are. So an example is, then come sweet death and rid me of this grief. Like this person actually is not talking to death. Death isn't there. Death isn't a person, but he's directly addressing it. So that would be an example of that. Okay. A cliche is a phrase that is overused and lacks original thought. So you can recognize this in rhetorical analysis, but I would definitely recommend not using these in synthesis essays and argument essays because, like it says right there, it shows that it lacks original thought. But anyway, like example, they live happily ever after, it's raining cats and dogs, I don't know, there's so many cliches. And then this one, I have a hard time pronouncing, but it's like colloquialism, whatever, you can read it. But it's the use of slang or informal writing unique to a cultural group. So like y'all or gonna, that's not typically like good grammar, but some books use it and some like speeches and articles use it because like that's how it's gonna make more sense to the story. And a great example of this that I'm just remembering now is, I don't know if any of you have read To Kill a Mockingbird, but this, I just spaced her name, but like the servant that works for them, she talks with good grammar when she's around their family, but when she goes to the black church, she talks like this so she can relate to them better. And so when I brought that up in one of my argument essays, and I brought colloquies, and even though it wasn't rhetorical analysis. And so that is a good one to remember, and it's kind of a distinct one. It's a little easier to remember because you can't pronounce it. So, and the next one is epitaph, which is a phrase or statement written in memory of someone who has died. So, like pretty much every engraving on a headstone would be this. So, like all the words of sage and all the men and women are merely players, which is written on that gravestone, and they did that in memory of someone who has died. And so it was like beloved mother and daughter, or just whatever. It's written in memory of someone who has died, and that would be the same with. Oh, this is gonna bug me now. Those things that are written in newspapers after someone died. I'm gonna remember later, and then I'm gonna say it, but. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? It's like the thing that obituary, that's what it is. Okay. Glad we got that out of the way. Okay, and the next is euphemism, which is a less harsh substitute for an unpleasant phrase or concept. So like kick the bucket. Like, kick the bucket means death, but death, it sounds a lot darker. Like, for example, if you're telling a little kid that their dog died, you're not going to say your dog is dead. You're going to say, like, your dog passed away. That would be another euphemism. And then imagery, this one's pretty easy to notice too. And just like tone, it can be used in a lot. So this is a good one to rely on if you don't remember a lot of rhetorical terms. Sorry, I'm kind of sick right now, but it sensory details or figurative language, and it arouses your five sentences. Wow, I can talk. 5 senses. So it like makes you, when a good book that you can like, you're reading and you can just picture everything perfectly, and you can like smell what they're smelling and hear what they're hearing. That's what Harry Potter was for me. But so like example is, I could hear the popping and crackling as Mom dropped the bacon into the frying pan, and soon the salty, greasy smell wafted towards me. And so that just helps you really imagine. It's not just saying, it could just say, Mom made me bacon. And that would not have the same effect. It wouldn't make you imagine it and smell the bacon and hear the bacon crackling. It would just say, Mom made me bacon. But see, this is a good example of imagery, and this is like good to use in your writing in general. Like, I don't know if any of you guys are writers out there outside of AP Lang, but imagery really helps your writing in all your classes. So, and then jargon is special words or expressions used by a particular group that may be difficult to understand. So, like example 10-4 is radio jargon for meaning like I understand or okay or let's go, whatever. And then code 8, it means officer needs help immediately. But like if you're a civilian and you didn't know that and you hear an officer saying like code 11, like you're not gonna know what that means. Hence, that is maybe difficult to understand. And so like nurses, I need 10 cc's of, and they say a long medicine name. So that'll be all examples of jargon. Okay, next is metal. I always have a hard time with this one too. Menomony, a substitute name. Okay, a substitute name, a figure of speech where a name of something is replaced with something closely associated with it. So, lending your ears, like you're not actually taking your ears out, like that's obvious, but you're letting them your hearing more, like, or you're listening your attention. But since it's close, listening and attention is closely related with your ears, you say lending your ears. Or like if you refer to royalty as crown, you're not actually talking about like I praise the crown. You're not giving your allegiance to a metal object. You're giving your allegiance to the person wearing it. But since they're closely associated, they just replace. Then a paradox is a statement that is self-contradictory. Example, less is more. Like, it doesn't make sense, like, logically, I guess, but in more metaphorical sense, it works. An example of this that actually, like, messes with my mind that I read was, like, if God can do anything, then can he create a rock that... If God can do anything, can he create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? And, like, not to be, like, religious or anything, like, but you can replace it with anything. Like, if Superman could do anything, then can he create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? Like, that's a good example of paradox. Just thought I'd share that all with you to mess with your minds. And then personification. So the attribute of personal nature or human characteristics is something that is non-human. So the stars dance in the sky. Stars don't actually dance. Like, that's pretty self-explanatory. But this actually brings up a good point that I want to make. Is that there's one sentence can have two rhetorical analysis. So if you remember back here, okay, epithet or no, let's say come to me. Okay, apostrophe, like then come to me, sweet death, and rid me of this grief. Death isn't a person, but it's giving them personal attributes. So the sentence could be both an apostrophe and personification. And so you can recognize multiple in one. Like, it's not just really cut and dry. Anyway, so the next one is satire, which is a work that targets human vices and fallacies, often uses sarcasm. And this is actually really important, so I'm going to be doing a whole nother lesson on this later in the year. But it's pretty much just another word for, I guess, sarcasm. But the reason it's so important, and this is kind of embarrassing, but when I took AP Lang last year, one of the prompts was this whole thing about how there's too many children in England, and this guy was proposing, like, let's just, this sounds so awful, how to solve the population problem is just to, like, use cannibalism and use the children as, like, livestock and food. And the article was satirical, but I didn't pick up on that, so I thought they were being serious. So my essay was, like, way off, which obviously it would be, but I missed like the thesis, like his thesis that was pretty much that we should not do that, and that, but anyway, so that's just why it's important to pick up on that. Okay, next is an hyperbole, which is an exaggeration or overstatement, and we use these all the time, like I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, which is also a cliche, just tying those in there so you can become more familiar with them. And then also like when people say like I am literally, what's a good example? People say literally all the time when it's not actually literally. Like, I literally just died. Like, when something bad happens, like, I literally just died. Like, you didn't literally just die. That's a hyperbole. And also not a good use of the word literally. But, I mean, I'm not criticizing that. I do that all the time. But I just think it's funny. Anyway, in that parody, is a work that imitates another author. So I don't know if you guys have watched The Simpsons. I literally watched that show since I was like 7. And then I also watched Tom and Jerry back in the good old days when that existed. And I didn't realize till actually this year, and you guys might think I'm so stupid, or not stupid, just like oblivious, but I didn't realize that Itchy and Scratchy was a parody of Tom and Jerry. And so anyway, but if you guys don't understand that one, if you don't watch that, that's fine. But 10 Things I Hate About You is another popular rom-com that came out like maybe in the 2000s or something. But it's actually a parody of Taming of the Shrew, which was written by William Shakespeare. So it's just something that imitates another thing. And like on YouTube or whatever, they're like parodies of songs, like mix the lyrics so it sounds funny, and that's also a very good example. So simile is comparing two things that are alike, two things with like or as. So the clouds are like soft pillows. But to change it to a metaphor, which I don't know if we're covering that, but a metaphor is like the clouds are soft pillows. A simile is clouds are like soft pillows. So, sorry, that's just an example. Symbolism is anything that represents or stands for something else. So, like in To Kill a Mockingbird, the mockingbird wasn't actually like at the end when he says the mockingbird gives this whole speech about the mockingbird. It wasn't actually talking about the mockingbird. I don't think that guy really cared that much about mockingbirds, but he actually stood for Boo Riley. So it's just something that stands for something else. Or like the Hunger Games is full of symbolism, like that little pin is a symbol. And if you guys are taking AP Lit next year, this is actually really important to get familiar with because you need to be recognizing symbols in literature all the time. So tone, I put this one in red just because this one is always present. You can always find a tone. Even though it may not really be that helpful towards like, some tones are really important to what the author is trying to say. Some tones aren't, but there's always a tone. So I put that in red. Like you can always fall back on this one. So here's the prompt. Here's the prompt that we saw at the beginning. And now we're going to go and analyze it now that we know more rhetorical terms and see what we can find. Just to clarify, there's no one actually watching this, correct? Oh, wait a second. Because if you are, I'll have you like share your opinions on what ones you find and then we'll compare. But okay, I don't think anybody's here. So I'm going to go ahead and change slides. Okay. So this is the same passage. I just typed it out because it's easier to read. So this is the passage below is the opening speech made in 1960 by American journalist and politician Clare Boothe Luce to journalists at the Women's National Press Club. In this speech, Luce went to criticize the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of the perceived public demand for sensationalist stories. And we see this today. Sorry to interrupt, but this is going to be important for the conclusion. But just read this part right there, like the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of perceived public demand. Like that happens all the time with like the fake news or whatever. But little interjection, and that's what you want to be doing when you're close reading too. You want to read that and then like jot down like happens today. Conclusion. And if you guys listened to my Toby lesson last week, you'll know that like conclusions, it's really important to tie in modern day stuff. So that'd be a great thing. And that's just not even in the passage yet. That's just in the intro or the, what do you call it? Prompt. And then it says, then in a well-developed essay, analyze how Luce uses this introduction to prepare the audience for her message. Support your analysis of her rhetoric with specific references to the text. So now we see that's a rhetorical analysis essay. So now we know that we're looking for rhetorical strategies. So I'm going to read this, and as we go, just mentally make a note, or if you're watching this, just write down rhetorical analysis you recognize. And then at the end, I'll show you some of the ones I recognize, and then we'll compare. And then we might get some of the same ones, but I might have some ones that you don't. You might have some ones I don't. And if anybody joins the next 12 minutes and they notice them, go ahead and comment them, and we can compare. But otherwise, if you're just watching this as a replay, I'll show you at the end. So it says, I'm happy and flattered to be a guest of honor on this always exciting and challenging occasion. But looking over this audience tonight, I'm less happy than you might think and more challenged than you could know. I stand here at this rostrum, invited to throw rocks at you. You have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, the American press. The subject not only is of great national significance, but also has, one should say, infinite possibilities, and 10 infinite perils to the rock thrower. For the banquet speaker who criticizes the weakness and pretensions, or exposes the follies and sins of his listeners, even at their invitation, does not generally invoke an enthusiastic, no less 15 a friendly response. Oh, I'm so dumb. These are the line numbers. No less a friendly response. The delicate art of giving an audience hell is always one best left to the Billy Grahams of the Bishop Sheens. But you are an audience of journalists. There is no audience anywhere who should be more bored. Indeed, more revolted by a speaker who tried to fawn on it, butter it up, exaggerate it, virtues, play down its fault, and who would more quickly see through any attempt to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next. Okay. I ask you only to remember that I am not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. For what is good journalism all about? On a working finite level, it is the effort to achieving illuminating candor in print and to strip away cant. It is the effort to do this not only in matters of state, diplomacy, and politics, but also in ever smaller aspects of life that touches the public interest or engages proper public curiosity. It is the effort to explain everything from a summit conference to why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does when it is fully risen in the heavens. It is the effort to describe the lives of men and women, big and small, close at hand or thousands of miles away, familiar in their behavior or unfamiliar in their idiosyncrasies. It is to use the big word, the pursuit of, and the effort to state the truth. No audience knows better than an audience of journalists that have pursuit of this truth. And the articulation of it is the most delicate, hazardous, exacting, and inexact of tasks. Consequently, no 45 audience, I keep reading the line numbers. Consequently, no audience is more forgiving, I hope, to the speaker who fails or stumbles in his own pursuit of it. The only failure this audience could never excuse in any speaker would be the failure to try to tell the truth, as he sees it, about his subject. In my perilous but earnest effort to do so here tonight, I must begin by saying that if there is much wrong with the American press, there is also much right with it. I know then you will bear with me, much as it may go against your professional grain, if I ask you to accept some of the good with the bad, even though it may not be such good copy for your newspapers, for the plain fact is that the U.S. daily press today is not inspiringly good. It is just far and away the best press in the world. Okay, so before we look into that, I don't know if you guys already saw it, but just quickly review what rhetorical analysis you found and comment them if you're here. But if you're, I don't know how to tell. I feel like it says one person's here, but if you're here and don't feel comfortable commenting, that's fine. I just want to let you know if you do. Like, I'm not gonna like embarrass you or anything. But so this speech is pretty much the premise of the speech is Luce is a journalist, and she got called to this conference of journalists to tell them what they're doing wrong, like what's wrong with them. And she starts off by saying, like, this is a hard thing. Like, even if you ask for this, you're not going to want this. Like, I don't know. This is a really, if you watch enough of my streams, you'll know that I'm obsessed with The Office. But this speech honestly reminds me of the one where Michael tells them all to, it's like the burn session. He tells them all to insult him. And if you've seen this, you'll understand what I'm saying. But she's just like, I just want you guys to know that you asked for this. Like, anyway. So this is kind of the premise of this. So I hope by now you've written down some you found. And if you haven't found any, and this is just the beginning, that's okay too, because I'll just show you what I found and you can kind of learn from that. But this isn't everything I found. This is just some things. But antithesis, so like two things that contradict. So I'm happy, I'm less happy. That was at the beginning. ethos appeal, which I didn't go over, but because I think that's pretty well known. But if you don't know, ethos, pathos, logos, it's like appeal to logic, emotion, and authority. So ethos appeal is appeal to like their emotions. So there's no audience more forgiving. She's giving them a compliment before she tears them apart. So that compliment is kind of like building up their emotional liking of her. And then illusion is the delicate art of giving an audience hell is always best left to Billy Graham and Bishop Sheen. Now, I personally didn't know who these two people were before I read the passage, and then in the bottom it said who they were. But this audience obviously knows that, or she would use this, so it's an allusion to something else. And then humorous, and they were, I think, pretty harsh bishops or something that would like, hellfire and brimstone and all that. But a humorous tone is consequently no audience is more forgiving, I hope. So she's kind of like joking around with him, like, guys, you asked for this, like, you better be forgiving. I don't know, humorous tone. That was kind of weird, but anyway. So if we go back, like, I don't know, if you can find any more, there's probably tons more. Like, this is a really good example of like a nice one to get in a test, because there's just so many you can choose from. But so now we're gonna go over another one. Sorry, I keep doing that. I just have so much mucus in my throat because I have so sick. But okay. So I'll read this out loud, and then we'll go over rhetorical strategies again. Oh wait, I did put this on the other side. Okay. Okay, sorry I keep doing that. Here, sir, what a time in which your tender feelings for yourselves had engaged you, thus to declare that you were then impressed with proper ideas of the great valuation of liberty, and the free possession of those. Wait, I didn't read the. Sorry, I apologize. I didn't read the. I skipped the first line. Okay. Okay. Benjamin Banneker, the son of former slaves, was a farmer, astronomer, mathematician, surveyor, and author. So this should be good in the soapstone part, like who the speaker is. You don't need to write an introduction like Benjamin was a farmer, astronomer, mathematician, and surveyor. You just need to write a short little thing of like, this was written by Benjamin, who was a very educated former slave, or something like that. But anyway. In 17, it's kind of like the math problems that they give you all this information, even though you only need two of the numbers to kind of trick you. I feel like this is kind of what this introduction is doing. But anyway, in 1791, he wrote to Thomas Jefferson, framer of the Declaration of Independence and Secretary of State to President George Washington. Read the following excerpt from the letter and write an essay that analyzes how Banneker uses rhetorical strategies to argue against slavery. So now I'll go to the next slide. Sorry, I'm going to grab a drink really fast. All right. Okay. Sir, suffer me to recall to your mind that the time in which the arms and tyranny of the British Crown were exerted with every powerful effort in order to reduce you to a state of servitude. Look back, I entreat you, on the variety of dangers to which you were exposed. Reflect on that time in which every human aid appeared unavailable, and in which even hope and fortitude were some aspect of inability to conflict, and you cannot but be led to a serious and grateful sense of your miraculous and providential preservation. You cannot but acknowledge that the present freedom and tranquility which you enjoy, you have mercifully received, and that is a particular blessing of heaven. This, sir, was a time in which you clearly saw into the injustice of a state of slavery, and in which you had the apprehensions of the horrors of its condition. It was now, sir, that your abhorrence thereof was so excited that you publicly held forth this true and invaluable doctrine, which is worthy to be recorded and remembered in all the succeeding ages. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And just so you know, I didn't spell these wrong. This is actually how the article is, because of when it was written. Anyway. Here, sir, was a time in which your tender feelings for yourselves had engaged you thus to declare that you were impressed with the ideas of the great valuation of liberty, and the free possession of those blessings to which you are entitled by nature. But, sir, how pitiable is it to reflect that although you were fully convinced of the benevolence of the Father of mankind, and of his equal and impartial distribution of those rights and privileges which he had conferred upon them, that you at the same time counteract his mercies, in detaining by fraud and violence so numerous a part of my brethren under groaning captivity and cruel oppression, that you should at the same time be found guilty of the most criminal act which you professedly detested in others with respect to yourselves. Sir, I suppose that your knowledge of the situation of my brethren is too extensive to need a recital here. Neither shall I presume to prescribe methods by which they may be relieved, otherwise than by recommending to you and all others to wean yourselves from these narrow prejudices which you have imbibed with respect to them. And as Job prospered to his friends, put your souls in their souls instead. Thus your hearts will enlarge with kindness and benevolence towards them, and thus shall you neither hear the direction of myself or others in what matter to proceed herein. I think that's the end of it. Okay. So this one I actually did not analyze yet, so I wanted to go through and show you how I analyze kind of like on the spot instead of having pre-written stuff out there. And I was planning on having you guys help me out with this, but since no one seems to be alive, that's totally okay. And I'll just kind of show you. Okay, so one that I noticed in the very end that stuck out to me was to wean yourself from these narrow prejudices which you have imbibed with respect to them, and as Job proposed to his friends. Now, this is a biblical allusion because he never mentioned this Job guy earlier. We don't know who Job is unless we understand that that's someone from the Bible. So that's a biblical allusion. And if I'm writing this rhetorical essay, like, why is that important? Why did he put a biblical allusion in there? One of the things would be that religious fervence was so big in colonial America. And so if he's quoting the Bible as a source of authority, that's a really good argument because the church was so important to people back then. So that would be a good rhetorical strategy to put as one of your paragraphs. And then you only have to read go, and there's so many to choose from. But let's go. For example, sir, suffer me to recall at your mind the time in which arms attack. So he's like, I don't know if this would be considered an anecdote necessarily. This could be an ethos appeal. He's telling them to remember all these awful times that they fought through and stuff to get where they are today. So this could be an ethos appeal, or anecdote would be kind of a stretch. It kind of depends on who's grading your essay, honestly. But then let's see. Another one would, like, let's say I found those two, and I'm just like, I cannot think of any more. I read this whole thing. I can't think of any more. I could easily do a fervent tone, a demanding tone, a strong tone. And that is easy to tie in why it's important because he feels so strongly about this. He's so upset that these founding fathers of America said that all men are created equal and like they were in a position of slavery and they fought so hard to get out just to put other people back in that position. So that would be good, and you could just write your three paragraphs and have that be done. But what I like to do is when I do my close reading, I write all of them down, and I usually get like 6 on average, unless it's a harder one. And then I star the ones I think I have the best evidence for. But anyway, so let's keep going, see if we can find anything else. Okay. State absurd. Was so excited that you publicly held forth this true anybody. Okay, so he quotes the Declaration of Independence right here. So you can see this as another allusion because like you need to know what the Declaration of Independence is, or you can also see it as a logos appeal because that's an appeal to authority. And so I might be getting that mixed up actually. Before I teach you the wrong thing, logos appeal. Okay, ethos appeal. Okay, I feel so bad. I mixed up. Pathos appeal is right here. So forget everything I told you about appeals. Pathos appeal is the emotional one. Logos appeal is logic. Ethos appeal would be right down here because it's authority. So like these are the founding fathers that wrote this, and so they have a lot of authority. And if he quotes them directly and their quote supports his argument, that is really strong. So like, for example, if you're arguing that, what's a good argument? Like, I don't know, the whole vaccine thing. If you're arguing that vaccines are terrible, like seriously, okay, I just want to make this clear. Any like political or religious references I'm making are not like my opinion. I'm just coming up with the examples that are modern, and that's important in appealing too. So just don't be offended if I say anything. But like, say you're making this argument that vaccines are terrible, and you have the greatest scientist in America that's so famous backing you up, and you have quotes and studies from him to back you up, you're much more likely to win the argument. So that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing here. So we have a pathos appeal, an ethos appeal. We have a biblical allusion. We have, let's see, the Father of mankind. That's also kind of an allusion to God. So let's say I'm out of, or in tone, we carry it on. So let's say I'm out of ideas, but I still want to find more. I can go back to my list, and you can't do this during a test, but this is just a good idea to get familiar with these. But like, you can look, is he doing a parody? Does he have a hyperbole, or simile, paradox, imagery, euphemism? So sorry, I'm so sick right now. So we'll go back here and look for those things. So like, does he ever use like or as in here? Although you. So I think those are the most prominent ones. Like, I'm sure there's more. I'd have to go through and read it again. And I was planning on doing that and you guys helping me with it, but because no one is live today, I don't want to bore you guys. But so I'm gonna go back to here. And I'm gonna describe, so in case you guys forgot, this is the loose essay, the one about like the journalist or whatever. I'm gonna tell you how I would go about like framing this, I guess. So in the intro, I would use soapstone, which, just so you can see what soaps. I wish there was a way I could. Wait, right there. Okay, so the speaker is Claire Booth Lewis, who is a renowned, journalist. That took me a long time to think of that word. Occasion is a speech in a conference that she was asked to give. The audience is other journalists. The purpose is to tell them what they're doing wrong. The subject is the follies of the American press. The tone is kind of judgmental, / humorous. I don't know. You can choose what you want. There's many tones, so. And then style, this would be like the rhetorical strategies they use. And the thing is, you don't want to just list these out. And I'm doing a whole nother, sorry, I'm frozen again. That keeps happening. Hello? Can you hear me? See, whenever like, I go frozen, I don't know if people can still hear me, so I just kind of stop talking for a sec. Anyway, if you can't hear me, that's kind of awkward for me, but it's fine. I'm going to do a whole, what I was saying is, I'm going to do a whole lesson on this later of how to use soapstone in your introduction. But anyway, so that would be my like basic knowledge for my introduction. And then these would be my body paragraphs, like antithesis. I would say I'm happy, I'm less happy. And I'd say this is important because she wants to show that she supports them, she thinks they're great, but then also she was called here to criticize them. She wasn't called here to give them compliments. And that kind of mirrors I'm happy, I'm less happy. So that would be a good paragraph to write. That would take you a paragraph. Ethos appeal. And I feel really bad about this. It's supposed to be pathos appeal, apparently. So pathos appeal. There's no audience more forgiving. They're kind of like going to emotions. But honestly, I'm just thinking about this. I don't know if I was smart or dumb when I wrote this, because ethos appeal, you could also be appealing to all these authority of the American press, like all these important journalists. So could kind of be both. And then illusion, the delicate art of giving. Okay, and then sorry, I didn't tell you the importance of that one. So that you could be like, she wants to make it clear to them that she's not trying to like make enemies or hold grudges. She wants them to like understand what she's saying and forgive her for saying it, even though she was asked to say it, kind of thing. And then she also kind of wants to soften the blow. She wants to tell them, oh, you're great, you're forgiving, you're all this stuff. Now here's what's wrong with you. So it's kind of like a compliment sandwich, if you guys know what that is. So that's what I would write for that paragraph. And then the next one is illusion, which I came up with. So the delicate art of giving an audience hell is always best left to Billy Graham and Bishop Sheen. So if we go back to the original, it says Billy Graham, an American Christian I can't say that word, like evangelist, and Fulton John Sheen, an American Catholic archbishop, both became renowned for their religious oratory. Their speeches were widely broadcast on radio and television. So what I picture when I hear that is like the classic hellfire and brimstone bishop sermons where, I don't know, you guys know what I'm talking about. But I did that because the importance of that is she wants to kind of relate that with, like, if a really religious person heard that speech, they wouldn't hate their bishop. They would like try to be a better Christian or whatever. So that's what she's kind of alluding to there. Like, I'm in this situation. I'm your pastor. I'm your bishop. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. I don't need you to hate me and stuff. I need you to become a better journalist. So that's what I'd write for right there. And then, so these would be my three. I just always do tone as a backup. Humorous tone, this is only for part of the speech, so her tone kind of changes throughout. But I think for most of it is kind of humorous because she's trying to lighten the mood, is what I feel like. She's saying, like, no audience is more forgiving, I hope, and like she's making references. There's no but the delicate art of giving the audience hell is always best left to other people. She's pretty much saying, like, guys, seriously, I don't want to do this. I've been asked to do this. Please just be nice to me. Like, but kind of like in a not a super serious manner. So anyway, so that is also kind of talking about like lightening the mood and stuff like that. So that's how to go around writing it. And then remember at the beginning when I talked about how right here, Lewis went on to criticize the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of perceived public demand. So I could talk about that a little bit and tie it to modern day. And I could also talk about the idea that, like, this is hard for her because she's criticizing her peers. She's criticizing people she works with. And that's the whole idea with peer pressure again. Like, how hard would it be for you to go into your class and tell all your peers how, like, they're awful and, like, all the things that are wrong with them? You wouldn't be very popular among your peers. And I don't think very many people would want to do that. So you can talk about, like, like, for example, if your friend took up smoking, it would be harder for you to criticize them and tell them, like, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, all this stuff, because you want them to like you. You want your friends to like you. You want your peers to like you. So you could also tie that into, like, the epidemic with, like, vaping and how more drugs are coming out, and it's harder for kids to say no because of peer pressure, and they don't want to seem not cool, and they don't want to criticize their peers. So that would be another, like, tie into modern day, and that would be a good conclusion to have. So then we're going to go do the same thing with this. Okay, so tie into modern day would just think of something with hypocrisy. Like, he's calling Thomas Jefferson out for being a hypocrite, for saying, like, we saved the American colonists from, quote unquote, a slave-like existence, but then they're putting Africans in slavery. So think of, like, I don't know, a popular political leader, a popular person who is a hypocrite. And I don't want to get into it, but, like, with people like Trump and Hillary Clinton. I think those could both potentially be good examples. Not saying which one I favor over the other, but those could be both examples that you can put in your conclusion for your modern. And then for your body paragraphs, the illusion, I kind of already talked about why it's important, just because people were very religiously fervent at that time. And so an allusion to the church would be a great argument and probably make a lot of people think twice. So I think I kind of went over the body paragraphs already. And for the introduction for the Stokes zone, I would just talk about like how he was a, sorry, I froze him again. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm just gonna, oh, there we go. Okay. Benjamin, you could talk about how he was a former slave, but he was also educated. And then for occasion, you could talk about like how this was in the middle of slavery. Let's see, what's a audience was Thomas Jefferson, obviously. P, purpose, was to make a valid argument against slavery. The second S is, shoot, I'm gonna have to go look. I didn't get this memorized yet. Subject. So he's writing about the problem with slavery. And then tone would be fervent or disapproving. There's a lot of tones that could work for this one. And then style would be the other rhetorical analysis strategies he used. But if you guys are confused on the whole soapstone thing, like seriously, don't worry about it. I'll get into that later. But that's just a little preview of what we'll be getting to next time. So do you have any questions? I don't think there's anybody, it doesn't seem like anybody's been really watching live this whole time. So I don't think there will be. But if you have questions like watching a replay, you can go ahead and I'll give you my Instagram or something so I can get DMs or whatever. But follow these people on follow these people. I guess I don't know people. Fiveable on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Great for getting reminders about live streams, getting tips on how to study, how to prepare for the AP tests. Just a really good for your overall academic life. And then this is just my bibliography, just to cite my sources. So I don't get sued. And anyway, so I'm gonna stop sharing this. I don't want to close the video. Okay, I don't know how to make myself big again. But anyway, I just want to tell you guys, thanks for watching, all those who are going to watch it in the future, because I don't think anybody was live today. But I'll be back soon, and I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. And I'm so excited for you guys to get into AP Lang, because honestly, it's one of my favorite classes. And even if it seems a little bit overwhelming right now, like, I promise you, it's a great class. So good luck on what you guys have going on this week with school, and I'll see you later.